Hey everybody, this is Jake Borbidge, Chief Investment Officer with Avidian Wealth Solutions, and I'm joined today with Robert Palmer, Head of our Financial Planning Department. Robert, we're going to talk about the rise of 401k millionaires today.
Yeah, I saw that article come out in MarketWatch where there's been over a 40% rise in 401k millionaires just this year.
That's a big number.
It's a huge number. And I think there's a lot of contributing causes to it, but the most important thing is what should these people be doing with this newfound wealth in their 401ks?
And that number, it's not just because the markets are up, right?
It's partially because the markets are up. It took a dip and then there was a resurgence in the market. So there was a rise that happened very quickly at the beginning of the year. But I would say the other thing is that we have pretty full employment in the economy right now. And a lot of people are contributing and trying to save despite the high inflation.
So if you're a 401k millionaire and you're getting close to retirement, what do? Do you just leave everything in the 401k or do you take it out and roll it over?
Yeah, so you hit on something really important with that question, which was near retirement. And so I think that when you're dealing with a retirement plan, it's important to understand the qualifying events that can allow you more flexibility with the way you go about investing and saving for retirement. So if you're prepping for retirement or you're about to retire, one of the things that you typically are allowed to do is something called a rollover, which means that you can have the funds from your 401k moved over to an IRA or a rollover IRA and have much more flexibility and much greater selection over how the assets are going to be allocated.
Well, what do you mean by greater selection?
Yeah, so with most 401ks, there's probably two things you need to keep in mind. One, the investment selection is going to be limited to the plan administrator's plan offering. So typically you don't get a ton of investment selection. It's limited to a few mutual funds, maybe some ETFs, but that's about it. And the other thing is that a lot of 401k plans also have embedded annual fees for administrative purposes. So rolling over to a rollover IRA, now all of a sudden the world of any public company, any bond, even some private investments you can potentially take advantage of that wasn't previously offered through your plan administrator's offering.
So that sounds like a lot of really great choices, but how do I figure out which choice to make once I make that rollover?
Yeah, so there's really only two options. You can either sit down and do the due diligence yourself and figure out how to go about allocating the assets, or you can contact a professional.
So Robert, let me walk you through a scenario. I've been working hard. I've saved up a couple $1,000,000 in my retirement, my 401k. I'm changing jobs, but I know I'm going to work for at least another 10 years. What should I do with that 401k?
Yeah, so there are, again, two options that you typically have to choose from. One is to do a rollover into an IRA or to roll the assets into the new 401k plan or new retirement plan at your new job or next job. There's pros and cons with both, so it's important to understand that. The main reasons why someone might go from a 401k to a 401k when they're doing their transition to the new job.
Like an old one to new one, right?
Right, an old
K
one
to
to new.
K.
Exactly. The reason why someone might do that is maybe they're looking to defer RMDs, required minimum distributions. If the funds stay within the 401k and they continue to work past the RMD age, typically they can defer RMDs until the year they stop working. The other side of that is that with 401ks, you can also take out loans. So those two components of the 401k system are what the advantages are. However, you could make the argument that outside of the RMD deferment, getting better investment selection and more bang for the buck in an IRA will typically yield a better result.
And if I'm switching over to an IRA, do I have to worry about paying taxes on this money?
No. If it's a direct rollover where you're basically taking the funds directly from a 401k to an IRA, it continues to be tax deferred. The tax treatment in an IRA is nearly identical to that as a 401k. So same tax deferred nature. When the funds come out and distribute to you personally, that's the only time that they're going to be taxed.
And how about what shows up in my IRA? Is it the same stuff that I owned in my 401k? Everything just kind of shifts over, or do I get something totally new?
So this sometimes depends on the plan and the investment offerings. So some funds are only accessible in a 401k plan. And so when you roll over from a 401k to an IRA, you may be forced to liquidate out of that mutual fund or out of that particular allocation and have to choose new allocations as soon as you get into the IRA. Other times, you could do what's called a direct transfer where the funds or stocks that you held in the 401k can come right over into the IRA. So maybe some or all of it doesn't need to change. And then the third option is you might be able to do a little bit of half and half.
Okay, interesting. So one thing that I'm always interested in, I like to talk about it from a number of different angles, is private markets. So 401k, IRA, private markets, can you do it in both places, or does it, kind of matter where your money is?
So it definitely matters. I will say that 401ks are very tightly regulated by ERISA. The investment selection that's in there is really meant to be a generic selection, something that's sort of above board, which means the selection, as I mentioned before, is going to be limited, right? You're going to have NASDAQ ETFs or mutual funds, S&P, large cap growth. Those are the standard funds that you see alongside target date funds. And target date funds in and of themselves, I just want to spend a minute on this. It's important to understand that they may expose you to more risk than you think. So target date funds, which is what a lot of people are in 401ks, typically have a allocation that progressively gets less and less aggressive as you reach the target date, right? So if you pick let's say you're 50 years old and you got a target date fund that's 10 years out, you're going to start off a little more aggressive than where you're going to be in 10 years. It's going to slowly allocate it to more conservative allocations over time.
But you don't have to do it as the individual. It does it all in its own, right?
That's exactly right. It's automated, which is why some people really like them. The downside is you don't have any say in how this reallocation takes place within the fund, so you have no control over it. It can't really be customized to your particular goals or needs. It's based strictly on age and risk tolerance. That's it. And the other thing to think about is that a lot of the times the fixed income component in target date funds can have bad debt added to them. You can have really bad bonds or really bad bond funds that are incorporated into the target date. So when you think you're mostly fixed income, you actually could be exposed to higher risk fixed income than you think. Now, with regards to that second part of your question involving private markets or alternatives, that's a really important thing to mention because that's something you likely will not have access to inside of a 401k. So rolling over to an IRA can open up a world of uncorrelated asset structures, different types of allocations that can be much more customized to what it is you're trying to accomplish and ultimately be a little bit better risk adjusted from a return standpoint.
So I think it's fair to say that when you look at the investments in a 401k, they have to be appropriate for every employee in the organization. And once you kind of hit that millionaire status, there are things that you may want in your portfolio that make sense, that didn't make sense when you were first starting out in your savings journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, you're typically at this point, if you have $1 million or more in the 401k, further along in your career, as well as having a higher asset threshold, which could in turn qualify you to get into investments that you otherwise wouldn't have access to, either because your annual income was a little too low and disqualified you, or your asset threshold was a little too low and disqualified you.
So let's say I'm in a situation, or I've decided I'm going to move over my 401k assets to an IRA, but I want a professional to help me out. Should I get that professional involved before I move those assets over, or should I wait, kind of make the transition and then hire a professional?
I always say you should be talking to the professional ahead of time, at least a few months before the rollover takes place, just because it can be a little complicated. You could have net unrealized appreciation in the 401k. You could have after-tax components in your 401k. You may even want to ask your advisor about doing a Roth conversion on the fly when doing the rollover. So there's a lot of variability in what is going to effectuate the best outcome for you as an investor, and that's why you want to plan ahead. There's a simple form that you can fill out online at avidianwealth.com that can help get you in touch with a professional to make these decisions.
Robert, this has been great, really interesting stuff. I appreciate being able to join you today. Again, if you have any questions, you want to get in contact with us, visit us at avidianwealth.com.